Matrix's Call Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
We are back again with our ABC dialogue. This time we will talk about the budget 2014 and 2015. Of course, we have three very special guests. All of them are involved in politics. We have Wasanthee, Sinnasamy. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She's the local councilor of Kuala, Selangor. We also have Sivarajan Arumugam. He is the national treasurer of Parti Sosialis Malaysia. And of course, we have YB Teo Nie Ching on the phone. She's the MP for Kulai. Of course, she's also from DAP. Welcome, everyone.
Hello. Good morning.
So, before we start our conversation today on budget 2014 as well as 2015, perhaps a bit of background introduction of who you are and what do you do. We can start with Wasanthee, perhaps.
Thank you, Arlene. It's been a pleasure having Arlene again in the studio. And then, good morning to YB.
Hi, good morning.
All right. Actually, we are very much focused to have this budget. Actually, from my point of view, we have more allocation for our gender budgets, especially not only for women, for the whole sum of men also, and then children and all that. So this is what I was projection of the upcoming budget for 2015. Yeah.
And
Yes, morning, Durian FM. Thank you for having us.
During ASEAN, actually.
Durian ASEAN. Thank you for having me this morning. So basically, in our work at Parti Sosialis Malaysia is that we are more concerned about the lower income group, basically the lower 40%. And our work, we are doing quite a lot in the urban poor in terms of their housing issues and so on. So I think I'd like to touch a bit on the housing issues and will the budget 2015 really address the housing issues for the majority of Malaysians?
And YB?
Hi, yes. I'm currently MP for Kulai, as you mentioned a while ago. I'm also the secretary for DAP Wanita. And as a mother of two kids, to me, the working mothers' welfare for the working mothers is one of my major concerns as well. So maybe later on, during our discussion, I would like to touch on that.
Mm-hmm. First of all, do you think Malaysians are very much aware of how much the government is spending and allocating money for the country's economy and the welfare of society? Maybe I would like to direct this question to Sivarajan.
See, basically, I think what we have seen so far in the previous budgets and also I think the upcoming one is that it's not exactly what we hear from the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, a budget really telling us of the actual financial situation of the country. We always hear that he just mentions about give outs. How much you want to allocate for this ministry, how much you want to give out for this sector of society, but really does not give us an idea of the actual financial situation of the country. What is the Prime Minister trying to do about our GDP and the percentage of debt, national debt that we have? How is he going to address that? How are we going to overcome about the household debt that we have, which is among the highest that we have in our country? The young people who are in the PTPTN loans and they cannot pay back those loans. What are we going to do about that? And in terms of transparency, in terms of corruption, we are doing no better. So the budget really does not frankly tell us the financial situation of the country and how the government of the day wants to handle the situation. It's just basically something like giving out sweets. It just tells you to calm you down, says that, okay, we're going to give you so much, but it does not really talk intellectually about the actual financial situation of the country and what clear programs the government has to address this.
Mm-hmm. So transparency is definitely one of the key area that you are concerned in, especially within the Parti Sosialis Malaysia. The government, the only time the government actually talk about the budget is either it's tabling the annual budget or the Malaysia plan, and this year is the 10th is the final tabling of the budget for the 10th Malaysia plan. So I have a question on YB Teo.
Yes.
As a mother of two, do you like any regular family in Malaysia. Do you think the government is addressing the concerns of those, not just from the lower income, but also from the middle class?
Yes, okay. I think that is a very good question. It's a valid question. So to me, I totally agree with what Mr. Sivarajan said a while ago. That actually, to me, at least as a member of parliament, if you want to know the budget, you want to look at the figures, you can get it. You can get it from the internet. You can get it from our budget. But the problem is, I think there is no accountability, and also there is no transparency. I just want to give one example. For example, recently, with this the subsidy for petrol, the cut for the subsidy petrol, now the allocation we give for the petrol subsidy for this year would be 21 million. But however, in the budget 2014, the total sum allocated for petrol and diesel subsidy is actually 22.3 million. So basically, there is a short of 1.3 million, and until today, we don't know where this 1.3 million goes to. And I think, of course, in the budget, for example, in the budget 2014, our Prime Minister did mention about the role of women and the well-being of families. It's mentioned in his budget speech that an allocation of 2.2 billion is given to the Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development. But however, eventually, how would this money assist not just the low-income group, but also the middle-income group? Because I think when we talk about, for example, programs like BRIM, etc., we are talking about helping those people whose household income is below 3,000 ringgit. However, we have a lot of young couples where their household income is more than 3,000 ringgit, but it's less than 6,000 ringgit, and therefore they stuck in between.
And they are not qualified for BRIM either.
They are not qualified for BRIM either, yes, and they are not getting, and they will be affected by this subsidy cut. GST coming, they will also be affected. But however, from our previous budget, we cannot see what are the policy for us to help them. So I think middle class group are actually one of the group that no one actually speak for them enough.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about gender budget, perhaps Wasanthee, you might want to add on more about the government's projection on creating a budget, especially with the concern of women in mind.
Actually, what has been spent for previous budget and all that, they have actually spent more on the social services, and then giving them goodies and all that, where they didn't really exactly focus on the empowering programs for women, especially what had been allocated previously, that was 2013, was 1.9 billion, and that have increased about 2.2 billion this year. But what I prefer here, if they get covered on the programs related to the gender budget, not only for women, so because men also are included, right? So I find that they must have this gender budget for all the ministries, especially not only for the women ministry and all that.
Mm-hmm. And if it's applied to all ministries,
yes,
what would the budget look like?
I think they have to increase actually more to the not only the educations, law and adequacy and all that, social service, all sectors. This is what I...
Mm-hmm. And what would the budget maybe consist of? What are the certain criteria that you think it should have to be a more holistic one?
Because they have increased the subsidies and all that. So as what Mr. Sivarajan told, there's no transparency. So they have to table it in a better way, so that everybody know where exactly the allocation goes. Okay, so in that case, we have to exactly to sit over again and then table it properly to where exactly it needed, rather than just you table it for it is so called as a budget of 2015.
I would like to put a focus on government's national debt, because you mentioned it, that's one of the key areas. The government is not being transparent, nor it is addressing it. But just to highlight, a lot of developed countries, even the US and certain European countries, they even Japan, they have high national debts as well. It's part of a capitalistic system where, in order for you to progress or to develop, you need to borrow money, you need to use a lot of money for that. But if you are to do it differently, how would you address the national debt as well as creating progress in the nation?
We can look at it this way. You see, debt is one thing that countries have to rely on, because most countries they'll end up with deficit budget and so on. They have to rely on borrowings. But we also have to hand up that all these borrowings, where is it going to? Is it going to finance our mega projects like the one MDB project, the 118-story tower in KL, center of KL? So where is all this money going to? Because now the government is saying that they have lack of funds, they need to fill up the coffers, and that's why the GST is also implemented, so to make up for this. And at the same time also we have a very huge national debt, about more than 50% out of our GDP. So if the government, that's the thing, it comes back to transparency question. If you still want to borrow, you want to manage it properly, you want to pay back properly, but then where is all this money going to? And we still have, every time the Auditor General report comes out, we find there's at least about more than 28 billion being leaked through improper procurement, government procurements, through deals which are very shoddy, So all of these things has to be addressed first. So if we really don't know where this money is going to, then how are we going to pay back? How are we going to know that it's going to be spent prudently? The other thing also, we must understand that we have a very large cabinet. For some reason, we have ministers for basically everything, even in under.
Isn't it a good thing?
I really don't know, and I really don't know. So basically, even sometimes you end up like the Prime Minister's department. It's like the dumping ground for ministers. You don't know what portfolio to give, and everyone goes into the Prime Minister's department. So it's a very funny thing, and so that's why we find that we need to have a lean government, a smaller cabinet probably, and then we really need to have people who are more accountable to these things, and that really needs to be sorted out.
And we are one of the biggest civil service in the world.
It's a very big civil service. See, we can have a good civil service and everything, but the thing is that it must be money well spent, and the Auditor General report speaks for itself.
But just to be fair, I mean, half of the civil servants are teachers and those in the education sector. So is it justifiable?
You see, putting your resources into a sector that you really need, I think it's okay. It is a good thing. You want to have more doctors, you want to have more teachers. It is necessary for the majority of the rakyat. But with all of these things that we have, and still we find our education system, the quality of our education is still very low. So it's not a quantity here, it's something wrong with the curriculum, like what was mentioned earlier by Saudari there. So I think putting enough resources is good, but I think we need a revamp on the curriculum. That's the other issue that we have to handle.
And I'm glad that you mentioned the issue regarding on government wastage. That's where I want to address to YBTO, because when it comes to government wastage, you see a lot of government spending on certain sector, but you don't see the ROI or return of investment, and that's definitely very clear. You can see the differences in terms of how the government spend and how we are getting enough inputs out of this. That would be the education sector. Why year and year round, including the budget 2014 last year, the government actually projected to spend 50 billion, more than 50 billion if I'm not mistaken, on that particular sector. But when it comes to discussion on the quality of education, we are still not on par with international standards. Why is this happening?
I think definitely we need a reform in our education system. You can see that actually the policy for education in our country, in most of the time you will think that actually we have no policy at all.
Oh.
For example, to be fair, we have the so-called National Education Blueprint. But however, you see, even recently, one small decision or one decision on whether the students are allowed to use the trial exam, the result of the trial exam for the SPM to enter university, our government actually make a U-turn. So here it shows that actually our government is not sure about what they are doing, is not clear about what they are doing. And recently you can see that in the international ranking for the university, our UM and also UKM, their ranking dropped again. So I think it shows that even though we have all these paper, actually the Education National Blueprint is very well done, is very well prepared, very well drafted, but it is actually done is outsourced to the private sector, outsourced to some PR company for them to help our government to draft it.
So a huge chunk of the money is actually to this foreign organization and companies.
Yes, exactly. Even though we have one of the largest cabinet, even though our civil service is one of the largest in the whole world, and yet when we talk about drafting the national blueprint for our country, we outsource it to third party, to PR company to do it, and after that we spend a lot of money on this as well. So even though we have all this documentation there already, we have this blueprint there already, but who is checking on the implementation of it?
Mm-hmm.
No one is going to report back to the rakyat, to the people, as to what is the progress, what is the achievement, etc.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to read. This is you can get it online. The budget 2014. This is what was being written on item number 117 on enhancing educational excellence. It stated that the government is committed to accelerating academic achievement, competencies, and skills. Towards this, the government will allocate a sum of 54.6 billion or 21% of the total allocation in 2014. And that's a huge chunk of money, and it stated that in addition the government will ensure that the implementation of the Malaysia education blueprint, which you mentioned earlier, achieves the objective of ranking Malaysia in the top 1/3 category of the world's best education within a span of 15 years. That's a lot of money. So do you think it's money well spent?
Okay, first of all, here again is another question when we talk about the transparency or the accountability. That paragraph I am aware of it, so actually I have a copy of the budget speech with me. But however, if you look at another booklet for the budget, you can see that the money we spend on education and training has been decreasing, has been reduced. In the year, of course, by the figure is largely different from what mentioned by our Prime Minister in his budget speech. I can show you that it's like in the year 2012, the total sum of money we spend on education and training is 7.5 B.
Mm-hmm.
But in the year 2013, the money we spend on education and training is 6.4 B. And when we reach 2014, which is this year, the money we spend on education and training is only 4.8 B only. Basically, the money we spend on education and training and also on the health and even on the transport has been decreasing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually because the money we spend on debt servicing charges has been increasing.
So
again, back to what
about the 40 million, if you minus with 4.6, you still have like some 40 something billion.
Exactly, that is the problem of budget. You can see that our Prime Minister will be giving huge number in his budget speech, but eventually we would not know from this line, for example, 25 billion, where does it go to?
Mm-hmm.
And we got different documents, we're giving you different figures, and that's why we said our budget, the budget in Malaysia, there is basically no transparency and there is no accountability.
You want to add on, Wasanthee, on this?
So on the education part, so I feel they should have proactive advocacy actions to encourage actually the Ministry of Education. The holistic curriculum needs to be integrated and not like a piecemeal approach that it's been taken by the ministry as the minister comes, it's a new system and all that. It doesn't really good for the students as well as the teachers. So they have to stick to a very integrated curriculum that can cater for all in SPU in future as well.
Mm-hmm. We will take a short break. When we return, more discussion on subsidies and other areas, as well as GSTs and other areas that Malaysians are concerned about regarding on the budget 2015.
ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
We are back again with our discussion on the budget 2014/2015 with Wasanthee, from local councillor for Kuala Selangor, Sivarajan, national treasurer from Parti Sosialis Malaysia, as well as YB Teo Nie Ching on the phone with us. She's a DAP member as well as MP for Kulai. So, return back our discussion. One of the key area when it comes to what youth or Malaysians are concerned is the issue of having a place to stay, or in other words,
properties.
In terms of properties, like Gowri, you and me. When it comes to the issue of housing, is one of the area that we know it's not easy for young people today to own a house. And also when it comes to rental, it's quite expensive, especially within the urban areas. And Sivarajan, you're very much well aware that the government do have policies such as the One Malaysia housing scheme. Do you think somehow it had helped to lessen the the burden of young people today to own a house? Or do you think young people should own a house, or maybe they should rent for life, just like what Switzerland's have?
Okay. You see, according to the Minister of Urban Wellbeing and Housing, Dr. Abdul Rahman Dahlan, he says that about 25% of Malaysian families do not own homes. So, as there are about 6.8 million households in the country, that would mean at least 1.7 million families really they do not own homes. So this is quite a problematic situation. See, whereby we must also understand that for you to own a home now, it is practically getting unaffordable. And in the fact that we have basically the largest income disparity gap, our Gini coefficient is about the largest in Asia. So that basically means that 40% of Malaysian households have a monthly income of less than 3,000 ringgit. I'm talking about household income, not individual. So total, if there's a wife and husband working, so basically household income is 40% of Malaysians' household income is less than 3,000 ringgit. But unfortunately, housing for this group of people is not addressed. What the government has is got a Prima scheme, and they are only talking about housing which is more than about 150,000 up to about 400 over 1,000. Now, if you really look at, because no way you're going to buy this house by using cash, you're going to have to go back to loan and so on. So with that kind of income of having a household income of less than 3,000 ringgit and the increasing cost of living, how are you going to pay back to your housing? Because naturally, if you're going to buy a house which is about 150,000, or even you're going to buy a house which is about 200 over 1,000, if you look at Klang Valley, even getting a 150,000 house is so difficult.
I just want to interject on that. With globalization, housing property, not just in Malaysia and other developed nations, but also all around the world, is on the increase, whether you go to Germany, to Malaysia, or to Indonesia. So how can the government ensure that young people can own homes when the reality is in this capitalistic system, prices are going up regardless how it is?
Yeah. See, on the question of the price which are going up, I think in Malaysia what has happened is that it's basically the problem with the speculation market. Because we have find that in the last 5 years, not before that, only in the last 5 years, the housing price basically in Klang Valley has increased about 35%. Now, I am quite sure that the building materials or even land prices has not increased that much. Now, why does it simply just increase? And this, I think, is because of speculation market. It's because of people who are buying houses not to stay. People who are very rich, they can buy multiple units, and it's basically for investment. And this you can sort of witness it quite practically. If you go at night to many of the condominiums in Mont Kiara and all the other areas, you can only find about 1 or 2 units really lit up. The others are all very dark. So that basically means that people are just buying those houses, those units. They don't want to stay. They just want to buy it for speculation purposes. The actual people that want to stay, these are the people, they don't get houses.
But speculation is legal under the law.
Yes, but it has to be regulated. It has to be controlled. So that is what we are saying is that the government must take more measures so that it sort of makes sure that people who are buying multiple units are controlled. If you're buying more than 3 units or 2 units, without in the event that you want to speculate, you must increase your taxes. At the moment now, there are some taxes, 5%, 10%, so on. But this has to be regulated. The other thing also, I think they should make a big database on actually how many people really don't own houses and how many people are actually owning multiple units. And with this database, I think you can control. And we must also understand that, like I said, because the majority of people, they don't earn that much, less than 3,000 ringgit. So we find that for this group of people, you cannot allow the prices to be dictated by the market. I think it's the government's responsibility to take out the housing for this group of people from the market.
Would you suggest the HDB system that is implemented in Singapore be applied in Malaysia as well?
Yes.
Having a much more stable housing prices for regular people?
Actually, what we are proposing here is that we think that the government should seriously look into a public housing authority. Like in those days, you know how PKNS played the role. They built houses for the people of the lower income so that they could stay. So I think we should establish a public housing authority, basically to take out one big group of housing for the lower income group, and the government has to manage it and regulate the prices. Because now what happens is that the government has got land banks, but what it does through its state economic development corporations is that it sells these land banks to private developers who are developing shop lots, developing condominiums. Why are they doing this? It should be the responsibility of the state to take back all these land banks and develop housing for the poor. So that is where I think you can really control, because when the state has got control over the land, it can control the prices, and you can also control the building materials and so on.
So YBTO, do you own a house?
Yes.
And
Yes,
was it difficult for you to own a house?
It is difficult, but at least I'm from a double income family. I.e. that myself and my husband, we are both working. And so I think, and luckily actually I bought the house quite early. I think
before the fire.
Yes, exactly. For example, the condo that I'm currently staying, when I purchased it, it was like 300k. By 1 year later, the price actually increased to 450. So basically, I belong to the lucky group that I purchased it early enough that I didn't get hit by the rise. But I can imagine that for young couples, that if they want to buy the same condo that as I'm the one that I'm staying now, and it would be 450k, you can imagine that the burden is indeed very, very high. And you see, even for those double income family, most of the time both of them need to own a vehicle because our public transport is not reliable at all. So not only do we need to bear the housing loan, but also we need to pay for the car loan. So basically, I think the burden is very, very huge. I agree with you that you mentioned a while ago that indeed the property price is on the rise in the whole world. But I think the problem here in Malaysia is like the income of our citizens, the income of our people is relatively low if we compare to other nations. And because of that, actually, our government actually implemented a program which is called One Azam. Okay, and this is one of the programs that they aim to, by using this program, throughout this program, they can eradicate poverty. And from the statistic I have, from January 2011 until March this year, basically there are about 140k participants. And their achievement is 66% of it, of the total participants. That would be about 93,000 of the participants. Actually, they earn an income of 300 for 3 consecutive months. So what I want to show here is like, if through this so-called One Azam program that we would like to, through this program, we want to eradicate poverty. And the achievement, the so-called achievement, is that we help about 93,000 Malaysians to earn 3,300 ringgit per month. And 300 ringgit, I'm not sure is enough for you to pay for the car loan. So you can see here that indeed our Malaysians, we are not, the salary or the income is not high enough to catch up with the increase of the property price.
And Wasanthee, you okay, enough about housing. I'm sure that a lot more criticism will come in. But Wasanthee, the government is also planning to reduce with its rationalization plan. It planned to reduce subsidy scheme entirely, and this would be towards especially on petroleum. Malaysia is a petroleum petroleum producer nation. Do you think Malaysia should have a good amount of subsidy for petroleum, or Malaysia should totally eliminate it, just like what the government is moving on right now?
Actually, now what I feel that they have to withdraw the subsidies, because it's actually it impact on the low income group and all that. So since we are oil producing country in it, we should so-called reduce the amount of petrol, selling to the people in Malaysia, rather than having these subsidies and all that. So.
So in a way that, let's say the government have a more targeted scheme on subsidy, the reduction of subsidy doesn't cover the lower income group, but more, targeting those who are middle income or higher income. But do you think to have a reduction on subsidy right now is something that is wise, or should the government improve on other alternatives like public transportation system, then it should reduce subsidy?
Yeah, definitely. As what YB just told us just now, our transport transport itself is not in a very good state. So for public transport, and then even most of them who are taking the public transport is not much happy with the service and all that. So government should look into that sector first of all. I feel.
For Parti Sosialis Malaysia, I'm sure you have other viewpoints on this, because currently the viewpoint is either you are pro reduction of subsidy, or you are pro reduction of subsidy until the government has somehow created a more integrated and efficient public transportation system, or you are totally against reduction of subsidy. A healthy country should have at least a minimum amount of subsidy on petroleum. What is your view on this?
Yeah, you see, the funny thing is that the government usually says subsidy now is such a bad word. When the government gives something to the people, it's known as a subsidy. When the government gives something to the private sector, it's known as an incentive. Incentive is not a bad word, for some reason. If you go into the MIDA website, the amount of incentives given to foreign investment which are coming here to make profits in our land is really massive. They get incentives for so many things, on taxes, on land, on and so many other things. They will get so many. They can get a tax holiday for more than 10 years. Subsidies on the petroleum that they use, the subsidies on electricity that they use. So all these are incentives given to attract foreign direct investments. But the same concept, when you're giving it to your own people, is known as subsidy, and it's sort of propagated in a negative form, such that you should do away with subsidies. So what we are trying to say here is that subsidy is not a bad thing. It is required, because we are a country whereby we have a very high income disparity. There's a large group of Malaysians which are earning very low.
But what about subsidy towards petroleum, which is a non-renewable resource?
Yes, you see, the thing is that Malaysian oil is supposed to be the better quality. Most of petroleum from Malaysia is exported. What we are using in Malaysia is imported oil, and that is the reason where we have to pay market prices, and that's the reason the government has to subsidize, so that it can give you a lower price petroleum compared to the market prices. But what we are trying to say here is that the net income that you're going to get by selling our petroleum to the overseas countries, and that is the one you should convert it to subsidies, because you cannot deny that we are a petroleum producing country. It is a natural resource, it is coming from our land, and thus it should be the right of every Malaysian to enjoy this right. So why don't you use that? And we ask this question again: where are the accounts for Petronas? Is it being presented in Parliament? Is it transparent? Or only Petronas coffers are only used to bail out companies? And
not just Petronas, but all GST in Malaysia.
Yes, exactly. So
are not really transparent in terms of their check and balances.
From what we know, most of these accounts are only presented to the finance minister. It should not be. It is a natural resource, and every Malaysian needs to know how much oil we are getting, how much income we are getting from this, and how it's being used. So we find that it is not something that we are not an oil producing company. So the net profits that we get from the sales of the oil should be used as subsidies. Subsidy is not a bad thing.
So to you, subsidy is not a bad thing. But to YB Teo Nie Ching, do you think GST is a bad thing?
GST is not a bad thing, but it's not suitable for Malaysia as at this point of time. For example, we have already mentioned that Malaysia made the majority of the citizens, the household income is actually below 3,000 ringgit. So, and we said that GST is a regressive tax, meaning that the lower your income is, the percentage of tax that you need to pay will be higher. Therefore, we said GST is a regressive tax. It's not suitable for Malaysia at this point of time. Of course, people will be using the excuses like we need GST, otherwise Malaysia will be bankrupt. But however, I would like to point out this is like Iceland got one of the highest GST in the world, and yet Iceland actually bankrupt. And there are some other countries or some other places which never implement or never use GST, and yet their economy is doing good, such as USA and also places like Hong Kong. So I think GST is an effective tax system. I think that is not deniable. But however, looking at the current income structure in Malaysia, we said this is not suitable. And I think the problem of Malaysia at this point of time is not that we don't have enough sources of income. For example, we produce oil. We have a lot of agriculture products as well. The problem of Malaysia, when we talk about money not enough, is because that there is a wastage there. That you mentioned a while ago as well. There is a wastage there. For example, pointed out by Mr. Sivarajan in our auditor report, every time you can see a huge wastage. With a Chase laptop with like more than 100.
So do you think if we reduce the wastage, government wastage, we don't need GST?
Yes, that's exactly the point. First of all, we need to reduce the wastage. Otherwise, even though you have another source of income, that is GST, you never reduce the wastage. I think more money will be wasted.
With the Socialist, Parti Sosialis Malaysia's point of view, do you think GST is needed in the country?
See, we look at
this is with the country itself is ready. Like let's say Malaysia, the government has become more efficient, and the cost of living is not as high as we are exploring now. Do you think GST is still relevant for government's income?
You see, we have to understand GST not an isolated situation. This is some of the pressures of global capitalism. See, we can see that the pressures of global capital and the measures that some of the international bodies like IMF and World Bank, they actually pressure nations to go by this way. Why did they do that? Is that it's basically a shifting of a tax regime from a profit-oriented tax to a consumption tax. So what we are looking at here, we can see that corporate tax since the 1980s has been going down. See, corporate tax means tax on profits. Companies which make profits and you tax them, which I think is a very reasonable thing. But we have seen that corporate tax is going down. In 1980s, it's what, 30%. Now it's only about 20%.
You're talking in the context of Malaysia.
Yes, now it's only about 20+%. And at the same time, also you find that what is being propagated internationally is that we should go into consumption tax, whereby you pressure a wide base of people to pay tax based on their consumption. I think this is not fair.
But sorry to interject. Lower corporate tax would means higher number of FDI in the country. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that is correct. But we find that is not the correct way to go, because once you have a tax regime in this way, meaning that you are taxing people based on their consumption, in comparison to you're taxing people based on their profits, which I think that should not be the way. If you can tax people based on profits, based on the income, that will be a progressive tax. But you're taxing people, and now it's a much broader scale on everything that they consume, and I think that is very, very bad, and that's very regressive. So that should not happen. And I think Malaysia is bowing down to this kind of pressures, and we are not basically ready to have this kind of regressive tax. And it's also, you must understand that it is not an alternative to sales and service tax. Service and service tax only apply to a small group of items, and which you had a choice. If you want to go for some luxury dining, fine dining, you can pay the tax. But here you have no choice. You buy milk powder, you get tax. You buy any goods in the store, you get tax, and that is not fair.
So last question of today. Since everyone has their own concerns of government's 2014 budget and also the upcoming 2015, if there's one area that the government should focus on, maybe if you have an alternative solution to it, what would you suggest to the government for the budget 2015. Maybe Wasanthee, you can start first.
Well, for me, what they should do should be in the budget. There's a few things that I could give her now. They should include these research, including action research, surveys and extra for research institutes, NGOs, etc. to advance gender budgeting, and to develop training modules or packages, training materials and information booklets and manuals for gender budgeting. This is more to gender budgeting, yeah. And then to monitor the financial performance and physical deliverables in a given sector. That is to assess whether the money was spent as planned and was delivered and to whom. That is more to transparency, yeah. To assess the adequacy of budget allocation to implement the gender-sensitive policies and programs. And also to monitor and assess the impact of the policy or program or scheme in a given sector, and to the extent which the situation for men and women, boys and girls have been changed in the direction of gender equality. And then to organize more workshops, seminars, training programs, conferences, etc. to facilitate capacity building and training for various stakeholders, including all ministries. As what I have told you, gender budgeting is not for only women, officers for central and the state government as well, and plus these corporate sectors and NGOs and etc. and all that. Finally, about the GST, the introduction of the GST for me, it is actually it's not a necessity for a Malaysian, because we are having a very comparatively other income groups and all that. We have a very low income group of people, and then the withdrawal of subsidies that which impacts of the low income group.
So there's more than one area that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, right.
So what about YBTO? If there's one area that the government should address in the GST?
One area, I think I hope to see that there are some concrete policies on how do we make our working place more family friendly. I think these days, double income family is a trend. No one is, more and more family are going to be double income family. At the same time, I think young working group, they start their family, they start to have kids, etc. So I think it's very important for us to introduce this concept that's called work-life balance. And therefore, it's very important for us to make our working place more and more family friendly. So I really hope that our government can look into this. How do we make our workplace more family friendly? What is our approach to actually increase the quality nursery in our country, and whether we can further improve on the parental leave, so that not only women is entitled to get parental leave, but also the father is able to get parental leave as well, so that both mother and father can spend more time with their kids, with their children.
So welfare of family is definitely number one priority that the government should concern in the next budget, I believe.
Yes.
What you mean?
Yes.
And
I think that when we talk about quality of life, it's not just about a house, but it's about a home where our family, our spouse, and also the children, where we can spend time together.
And lastly, Sivarajan.
Yes, I think what the Prime Minister has to really do this Friday is that there's no meaning in presenting a budget if they don't address the income disparity. We are the worst in Asia. So I think one thing is that they really need to review the minimum wage, which is now set at 900 ringgit. You need to review that, because if you want to do GST before the minimum wage being reviewed, I think it's meaningless. You're going to surprise a lot of people. You need to review it back to 1,500, which is our recommendation actually. So I think the government has to look into this, and it has to come with some concrete plan how it's going to address the income disparity. If you don't address this, I think the budget is meaningless. Thank you.
With that, thank you very much. Thank you to Wasanthee, Sivarajan, as well as YBTO for sharing your views with us.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.